No way.
Hey, what's going on? It's your boy Prince Rara here, and I'm with some special guests that I have with me today. And we're going to be speaking about a few serious topics, but I think it's topics that people need to talk about. They need to hear about it, and they need to get in on these conversations. So please, in the comment section, please let us know what you think. If there's anything else that we've missed out on, please let us know, because we can definitely incorporate it in our next episode. And the series that we're coming here together for is called Brinos Abroad. And you're probably wondering what that means, but we're going to unpack all of that when we get further into this conversation. And I just want to introduce my guests. I have the lovely cousin of mine. Cousin, did you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, I am Raylene. I was born in South Africa. I now live in Australia, and that's it.
Okay.
Is that fine for now?
Yeah, that's fine. And my other lovely cousin, Crystal, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Crystal Montier Richards. I am a life coach. I, funnily enough, am also a brino abroad at the moment. I'm visiting from South Africa, and I've been here for the past 6 months.
I know that we've had sort of conversations in the past about identity and what that means to each individual. And I think being that you're here in Australia, you've been able to see a whole new meaning of what identity is. First want you to explain what identity means to you, as well as how it is perceived in South Africa.
So, what identity means to me is who do I think I am all the time, not just in a particular setting. It's no matter where I am, who am I? And yes, it is informed in a large part by the grouping of people that I belong to, by my family, by the culture that we have accepted as our own, and also, quite frankly, formed around ourselves. So, if I want to give you a little bit of background, I'm what you call a coloured South African. And I know that in black parlance that sometimes is something that is looked down upon, that, we should not identify ourselves as coloured. In South Africa, historically, it was a race that was created, or a racial name that was created by the apartheid government to indicate that we are of mixed race. Now, clearly, the mixtures are dependent upon where you're born. So I was born in KwaZulu-Natal, in the city of Durban, which has historically a massive Indian population. And so my particular background is of my 4 grandparents. One is a full-blooded Indian. One is half Indian and half French. The other one is a very well mixed coloured South African with Southern Bantu, Portuguese, and various other influences from Senegal, because his dad came from Madeira. So his dad was not a white Portuguese, he was a mixed Portuguese. And then my other grandmother is, or was, half German and half Spanish. So as you can see, I'm a well-mixed coloured. And we identify ourselves as that, largely because that's what we were told we were. And I see no reason for us to deny the fact that we are mixed. It is, in my view, it is something to be quite proud of. That we can relate to so many different cultures without even trying, because their blood runs in our veins.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Cousin Ray, I want you to have your sort of, if you could give us like a just an inclination of what you've sort of dealt with in regards to your understanding of identity as a coloured South African?
That's a very hard question because I feel like how I view it might be different to how other people view it because I've experienced being a coloured person more outside of a coloured community than other people have. So my identity lies more in how my parents show me what being a coloured person is than how, like you would or Crystal would. Like it's not a
lived experience.
yeah, not a lived experience, which makes me identifying as coloured very hard because I am it, but culturally I am multicultural. Like I am a, how would I word this? I feel culturally like a New Zealand human and a South African human in one person. So I kind of struggled to differentiate what is coloured and what is just my parents and what is the New Zealand part of me. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
Sure. And could you explain that in a little bit more, your journey from being here in Australia?
Okay, so I was born in South Africa and I lived in South Africa until I was 11. My parents decided to move to New Zealand and I lived in New Zealand until for like 14 years. So I grew up in New Zealand. I lived in New Zealand more than I did in South Africa and I moved to Australia 2 years ago. So have kind of lived culturally differently at very important times of my life, which made my identity very confusing.
For me, for myself, I'm born in Australia. I'm bred in Australia. Growing up here in Perth, I had the opportunity to be raised amongst a lot of coloured South African people. There's so many colours that live in Australia and particularly in Perth. So in some ways, I've kind of lived in like little South Africa in some sort of ways. So I've been able to have my pocket of being who, like an understanding of who I am, but then also stepping out into the world of being like, oh, what do I represent outside of that culture? But I can tell you that for just very briefly, like for me, I feel like it hasn't been the most easiest thing for myself. But I think it's maybe because I'm not from there, but I've got family who are very proud of being South African and proud of their country, like in terms of, or in many different facets of that, whatever that means to them. And for me, for myself, I'm like, wow, like I want to have that. I've always wanted to have that piece, you know? So I think that for myself, I've always been like, no, I'm a South African. No, me, I'm a coloured. What you mean? That's how I perceive it for myself.
I listened to a podcast recently in which Dr. Tara Swart Bieber, she's a neuroscientist, and she discussed identity and the elements of identity. And one of them was an identification of, are you just like your father? So, you know, then that becomes part of who you are. Culture is another one. What culture do you ascribe to? And this is what is interesting about being a coloured South African, is that it depends on the language you speak. So I speak English because I come from Natal and that was the last British outpost. And so we spoke English. And then I have, as I said, a large Indian influence in my culture. So there's a lot of the Indian culture incorporated into the way we do things. Because that's all culture basically is. It's how do we do things.
Could you expand on that? Like what sort of aspects of Indian culture has been infiltrated into coloured culture?
From a Durbanite perspective, certainly what we eat, the way that we identify with our family members so strongly. It is quite an Indian thing to, you know, for multiple generations of families to live together and to take care of the elderly and to take care of the young. Interestingly enough, in South Africa, it is very difficult to adopt a child from a coloured or an Indian background because those two cultures look after their own. And I think they learned. We learned it from the Indians. Because I've lived in Johannesburg now for the past 20 odd years, I've been exposed to people that are Afrikaans speaking, colored people, who are white, more white, and African of origin. And so they've assimilated a lot of the African culture as their own, and then of whatever parts of the white culture. And so they would also eat slightly differently to us, speak slightly differently, and in a lot of ways have slightly different values to us.
Ray, in terms of your understanding of identity, have you learnt who you are through family members that you have grown up with? And how has that formed your ability to understand who you are?
Good question. Yes. I feel like the most coloured person I know is my dad. Like, he is the most, like, brino man that you will ever meet in your life. He, like, preaches, exudes being a coloured human. So he would be the person that I was exposed to my whole life, because I didn't have that experience, or, you know, growing up in South Africa or growing up around a lot of coloured people. My mum is coloured, but is not very, like, a people. I don't know how to explain it, but she's just not. She's herself, and that's her identity.
Do you know why she's not like that?
I think growing up, it wasn't like a thing that was important. Growing up in apartheid, it was very not exciting to be a mixed race person, because you don't get to go to the good school, or you have to go to the school, or you have to live here. So for her, her brain and how she is and her education was the thing that she held on to more than I'm a brown human, and that is something to be proud of. I would say. My dad, very clever, but that wasn't his thing. He wasn't like the smart boy that could use that as his identity, if that makes sense. So yeah, I learned it from my dad.
Okay, Crystal, wait, you need to explain to us what brino means, because we're saying brino, and people don't know what the hell brino is.
Okay, so brino is it's a slang word, which is slang is a language that is colloquially spoken by the people. And in Durban, we use the word brain to indicate brown, and o meaning a man. So brain o means brown man, but it incorporates brown woman as well. So when we refer to brainos, we are referring to colored people across the board. The Afrikaner people with the Afrikaans background refer to us, colored people, as bushies. Oh, yeah. So when they say bushy, they don't mean like in the Australian context of bushy. They mean literally descended from Bushmen, of which many Afrikaans-speaking South African coloureds are descended. Bushmen, meaning San and Khoi. Now a very small tribe mainly in the Kalahari Desert, still practicing their ancient rituals, etc. And there's a song by a group of young coloured men called Brainos, we are the Mainos. And for me, that is a beautiful song, because it just indicates how proud they are to be of mixed race. There's a lot of pathos in that, though, and I guess if we had to speak to people like psychologists and social workers, that they would explain, how it came about that there's pathos in that pride.
I have a question for you.
You got a question for me?
Before I forget my
What's the
question.
question?
You said, well, obviously we know that you weren't born in South Africa, but you have been immersed in South African coloured culture. Do you feel like not being born in South Africa is like, not a sore point, but it's like a little soft
I
spot?
hate it.
Yes?
I hate it. I hate not being born in South Africa, and I tell everyone I'm born in South Africa. All the time. All the time. Even like up into my old age, my big self, I'm telling people, yeah, no, I'm born in South Africa. and I don't know a lick of the language.
Well, you know slang.
I mean, I know some slang, but I mean, I don't know. There's so much I don't know about it that even like just of going to visit, like I was like, whoa, they do it so different compared to what I've been brought up to know. I was like, oh, okay. And it was even funner than what I had experienced just living here in Perth because I feel it's so like watered down.
Yeah.
Like,
Sorry.
Yeah, I guess for me, the reason why you would have experienced it like that, and because you came like 11 years ago to South Africa, is your parents left before the changeover. So what the changeover did for many of us that were not white is it gave us a voice. We have freedom of speech in our country, and so we can say what we like, up to a point, of course. But it also allowed us to become more, how can I say, have pride, not just in being a colored South African now, but being in a pride in being a South African. Because before, being a South African was almost like, oh, those people live under a repressive regime. White South Africans certainly lorded it over us. There's no way to candy coat that part. They lorded it over us, made us know that we were not as good as they were, and all of that. Now suddenly you get a new dispensation where you're allowed to be all that you are supposed to be. And so you have this pride now in yourself, and your parents left before they could experience that. And that is why what you are seeing is the old, or a lot of it is the old way that colored people behaved under a repressive regime. Whereas how you see us now is we can say what we like up to a point.
You guys are like liberated.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that what I do notice, I noticed though that like my parents and South Africans that are left in the 80s, they their thought pattern and what they think about themselves as well as like their country is sort of stuck in a time from when they had left. So even like their vocabulary and whatever perceptions they have of other races have been frozen in time to where they've departed from the country. So I think even like for yourself, when you've mentioned things about whatever it could be, you've got such a new way and fresh perspective on it because you still live there.
Correct.
And you've evolved from those ways of thinking.
And like I say, it's what the new dispensation has given us is the ability to be who we were meant to be, not who those people told us we were back in the day. And so I have many friends of all the population groups now, which basically what was the meaning of apartheid? Keep them apart. Keep them apart to do what? To control them. And that's all that was. And now everybody, you can relate to who you want to relate to. You can marry who you want to. You can live next to who you want. Your parents didn't experience all of that. So they experienced the real oppression of self, as it were.
Whatever your parents have dealt with in their past, living in a regime like an apartheid, do you feel when you were living in New Zealand and even in Australia, do you feel you harp maybe like a chip on your shoulder because you're like, oh my God, I can't associate with these types of people because this is what my parents said that I shouldn't be because I wasn't allowed to, or because they are of a lower standard or something like that?
Yes. I feel like I'm in the middle of both, right? Because the people that are my age, that I know that are coloured and from South Africa, live the way that you do. Like they speak the way that you do. Everything is inclusive, but my family is not necessarily the same. And even with my parents, the way they experience being coloured is on either side of the spectrum. And so for my dad, I'm like, yes, I am this amazing brown human that is coloured and like this is my culture. And my mum is not detached, but very distant from embracing this colouredhood, because her parents didn't either. They are very much that, not liberated. We are brown, like hush hush.
Okay.
Behave, be good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where do people think that you come from when you walking around in New Zealand, living your daily life?
Most people don't know where I come from. I also don't look like, or I feel like I don't look like the typical coloured person. Other people might think differently. Coloured people know I'm coloured, but people that aren't don't know where I'm from. People in Australia think that I'm Māori, but I don't know why. I don't think I look like I am. I just look like an ambiguous human. I get everywhere. People think I'm South American the most, which
really?
I think is weird because but that's, yeah.
Where in South America did they say?
I don't know. They just ask if I'm, that's the assumption
They just start
immediately.
speaking Spanish.
Yeah, I should. Yeah, that's what I used to get the most in New Zealand, is South American.
No matter where I've traveled in the world. My first trip to the US, they thought I was Spanish. They started to speak to me in Spanish, and then I came out with this quite English accent. It's like, no. And then on my way back to South Africa, I sat next to a Greek lady. It was a Greek airline, and she started speaking to me in Greek. And all of the way, I've been to Fiji. When I go to New Zealand, they think I'm a Maori. They ask me what's my whakapapa. Oh, yes. And no, and they insist, no, you look just like us. So I go to Fiji and they tell me I look like a local. So look, that to me is something we should be so proud of. We should embrace it and say, I'm a person of the world. Because if the Martians land tomorrow, we are the world. Do you know what I'm saying?
See, and I struggle with that.
Yes, me too.
I struggle with that.
I want people to know immediately, like, this is
Who I am.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
I can't stand the fact that people are trying to figure out, oh, what are you? Oh, but you look like us.
Yeah.
Oh, you could. No. I just want to be like, I could be
Yeah.
happy just doing like a typical colored or
Yes.
something like that. Or they'd be like, oh, he's this or he's that. Like, that's all I want. Like, you know what I mean? And I don't know if I see the beauty in it, because I don't think I see the beauty in this multicultural background, because I didn't even know anything about all those. I didn't even know, it's not even celebrated. Like, I can't say like, oh, the Portuguese side, oh, I learned how to make Portuguese tarts, or
Yeah.
or I've got a cousin in Portugal that said I can go live at their house. So I'm not even benefiting from it.
Yeah.
So I think, what is the point? You know?
Uh-huh.
There has to be a benefit.
There has to be a benefit. And I think that, like, when I see, like, all my, like, say my friends from, like, Nigeria or Eritrea, and they speak either, like, Swahili or Tigrinya. Yeah. Like, they have a dance, like, they got a dance, and they got their injera, and they got all this stuff, whatever they do. Like, they know that's their culture, and they're strong in that. And when they have a wedding, you can, like, I've seen multiple times when they have their family weddings or whatever, like, straight away I could just look and I'd be like, oh, that's like an Ethiopian, like, family get together thing, and they're doing their usual traditional, like, thing. And I'm like, wow, like, I wish I had that. I wish I had that, and I could be so proud in it. But I feel like there's no pride in it, because I feel that we deny ourselves of so much as being colored people. And I think that with this blend that we've got, yes, it could be great for somebody else, but then coloreds choose where they want to be. If they too dark skin, then they want to be acting like something else. And I just say, for instance, like, if there was something that's going on TV and it's got our black brothers and sisters doing something on the TV, then we want to say, ooh, that's too much. I'm not part of all that, you know what I mean? But suddenly when a nice beat comes on and there's something, whatever else, then suddenly they're so African. So it's like, what do you want to be? You know what I mean?
So I think the question that I need to ask you is, do you find them or that behavior of theirs to be two-faced, or do you find it ambivalent?
That means there's a lot of two-faced people in.
So I think for me, that explains so beautifully what you just described now. The typical conflict within a person of mixed race. We can identify with the hurts and the joys of all sides of the coin. And so it creates the conflict that happens maybe between black and white people, then is happening within a colored person all the time. And so we've got to temper it with something. And I'm sorry for everybody else that doesn't agree with me. I temper it with pride in being able to carry all these different races within me and still be a decent human being.
I like that. That sounds amazing.
But
Anything that's said before, it doesn't count.
it does. I would love to feel that. It's not that I don't feel that, but I do feel like because you've grown up surrounded by your people, you have the ability to be prideful about it. It's the isolation and the not being like those hurts and that these feelings don't allow me to like stand strong in my colourdom because I don't have that like foundation. I have the foundation, but the house was kind of built in the wrong place, and do you know what I mean? It's not you. It's not that whole house that was built correctly in the right place with the right materials. I am kind of iffy.
Yes.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, I can understand exactly what you're saying. And I do understand that, being away from the culture that I grew up in would make you feel like that. And I guess my kids and now my grandkids would have an advantage over the two of you. Because they, that's the milieu in which they grew up, but that's what they understand, that's what they identify with. And so if I hear you correctly, you saying that this is an identity problem, that you'd feel like you don't, it slightly, but you don't really feel like you belong there. Just as an interesting aside, in South Africa itself, white people don't know what a colored person is a lot of the time. So if you're presenting with an African look, you've got a certain texture of hair, you darker skinned, your face is rounder, different, your features are more African, they won't know that you're a colored. But another colored person will know.
Interesting.
Many times they've asked me if I'm Indian, because I present as an Indian. I've got much more Indian in me than any other race. So then they just assume that I'm Indian, and I let them go with that. Because does it really make a difference?
Yes.
In what way?
Because